So I wanted to make this video, but I wish I didn't have to make this video. I see this comment more often than I'd prefer. And I saw it just recently on a Nate Edwardson video, and it's this idea that CrossFit is dying. And this specific person said that the games won't exist in 2 years. So his thought is that there's gonna be this games, then I guess maybe next year, and then that's it. And I disagree. And I don't think the data backs this person's opinion up. And I am going to show you that and explain some of why I don't think CrossFit is dying. In fact, I think CrossFit is growing from its lowest point. I don't think, and pretty positive it's not true, that CrossFit is at its biggest point ever. I think that was maybe 2018, but maybe you can make some arguments it was like 2014, 2015. But it had a low point, and things are trailing upwards, not downwards right now. But it is popular, and I guess fun for a lot of people, maybe, I don't know, to comment that CrossFit is dying. Because I see it on my videos, I see it on other people's videos, and then I see some people claiming that what Andrew Hiller is doing is bad for CrossFit, or that he's trying to hurt CrossFit, and I don't believe that's what he's trying to do. And not everyone watches all of his videos, or mine, or anyone's, but I wanted to put this here where he talks specifically about how he does not want CrossFit to die, and that's not his intentions with his videos, just in case you missed it.
Rich Froning and myself are coming from. We want what's best for this thing because I survive on CrossFit getting bigger. I want them to get as big as possible. The bigger they get, the more views my freaking channel can get. Rich Froning, born and bred in CrossFit. It's ridiculous that they don't listen to him on certain things, and even more ridiculous that they kick him out of certain events.
I am pretty certain what Hiller is trying to do is help CrossFit. Sometimes is it maybe an unconventional way? Sure. Is it the way that I'm helping CrossFit or hope I help CrossFit? No, but I don't want to do what he does. He doesn't want to do what I do, and I feel like we need different voices in the space. So he's taking one approach to try and reach more people about CrossFit and to legitimize the sport and the methodology. I have a different method, but I think there's a place for everyone, and I hope we can all contribute to CrossFit one day growing past what was its biggest point. So let's take a look at the numbers, and open registration, I think, is one of the best ways to do that. It's a great way to see who's participating in the sport and who is contributing to helping the CrossFit Games grow. So if we take a look at the numbers, obviously 2011 was the smallest year. That was the first year of the Open. We see an increase in 2012, big increase, a big increase in 2013. 2014 is also a really big increase. 2015, these are all huge increases. So we're saying, like, you know, 169%, 100%, 49%, 30%, and almost 19% increase from 2015 to 2016. And this is because it was so new. It's not necessarily because that's when CrossFit was at its best. It's that CrossFit hasn't been around very long. And the numbers are gonna continue to grow as the sport grows. But there was a hiccup. So as we continue to go, 2017, 380,000, 2018, 416,000, which sounds like a huge number. It is a lesser increase than we've seen in previous years, but because they got past that 400,000 mark, I think a lot of people, like, that just sounded so much bigger, even though the increases we had seen previous to that were actually much bigger. So after 2018, things plummet a little bit. And if you don't have any idea why that may have been, there was a large firing of CrossFit personnel, the media staff. There was an attempt at some rebranding. And the idea was, at that time, from some of the higher ups to shift away from the games mentality, more of a CrossFit for lifestyle mentality. And it was reflected in the open registration, the competition, because that's not the direction they were moving at that time. We can talk about whether or not that was a mistake or how that happened, but that's not really what I'm trying to do in this video. I'm just trying to show you the numbers and explain why we saw that dip. And that is likely the reason. Large firing and the shift in the thought process of the type of direction that the higher ups wanted to take CrossFit. Greg Glassman specifically at that time, the direction he wanted to take CrossFit, away from the CrossFit Games. And if that was his goal, we could see in the numbers that he did that. So between 2018 and 2019, the open registration went down from 416,000 to 357,000, which was negative almost 15%. That was a fairly big swing. And then it gets bigger. So also, if you weren't around or don't remember CrossFit at that point, the 2019 Open and the 2020 Open were both in 2019. They were about 6 months apart. And as someone who did those, there was a moment when I was like, I don't know if I ever want to do an open again. Trying to peak and compare so close together, an open in February and an open in October, it was too much. And I think a lot of people weren't on board with doing 2 opens in 1 year. And that was also at the point where there was some shifting in how you qualified for the games. You didn't have to do the open, so not everyone was doing the open because it wasn't quite a linear progression to getting to the games. You can qualify through some other events. You didn't have to do the open. Now, if you want to go to the games, you have to do the open, so more people sign up for it. But in 2020, we saw a 33% decrease in open participation, down to 239,000 participants. And there was a long time between the 2020 Open and the 2021 Open. The 2020 Open, like I said, was in October of 2019. Crazy that happened because I don't know if we would have been able to finish the Open, depending if it was still 5 weeks, what was going on at that point, if it had been in February and March of 2020. But it wasn't. So we had a full 2020 Open, it was just in 2019. And then the next Open wasn't again until February, March of 2021. So it was about 18 months between the 2020 Open and the 2021 Open. And you know what we saw? An increase in participation, 10%, which is actually significant when you think in the middle of that, we had a massive lockdown, a lot of people shifting in how they work out, a lot of people shifting to working out at home, and still, we saw an increase going from 2020 to 2021. And then that 10% increase became almost a 12% increase in 2022, and it was a smaller increase in 2023, but we did get over that 300,000 mark again. So I find all of this optimistic. More people registered. More people have continued to register. Since that downfall, a lot of crazy things happened between that 2020 Open and the 2021 Open, including a lot of people de-affiliating because there were those issues with a tweet from Glassman. And if you don't know more about that, you can look it up. That's a lot to get into right now, but there was a lot of people de-affiliating over that. So to think that things actually went up there between those 2 opens, despite a lockdown and craziness within the community, it's optimistic. Again, I think that CrossFit is on an upward trajectory again, which it might not feel that it's at its highest, but I think there are efforts going on to grow CrossFit back to its highest point. And I think the idea that in 2 years or 3 years, or people picking these random number of years, CrossFit Games are going to not exist, I think that's unlikely. Could I be wrong? Sure. I don't know everything. I can't see the future, but I think that the data doesn't point to that. And if we talk about the semifinals that just ended a few weeks ago, a lot of them sold out. I was at the North America West semis in Pasadena, and it was sold out Saturday and Sunday. It was loud in there. And I was actually surprised how many people were there on Thursday. It was not sold out on Thursday. I mean, it's literally was while people were working. But I was surprised to see how many people were there. And on the weekend, it was so loud, so exciting. It felt like old regionals. And I think that is pointing towards growth. The fact that they can sell these out, maybe they're not as big or being held at as big of venues as they used to, but they had a number of people they were hoping to get there, and they got them there. I knew someone who had to like go buy tickets off of someone else because they couldn't get tickets. So that's optimistic. It was also sold out in North America East. I believe Europe was sold out over the weekend, and Torian Pro always does very well down in Australia. Yes, some of the other smaller semifinals don't do as well, but the big ones with the most athletes, they did well this year. People showed up. People wanted to be there. That's not a sign of death. Now, I know some people might point to a sign of death being the fact that they didn't stream all the events on the regular broadcast. And I understand why that may look like that. But I believe, and this is just from talking to some people, this information has not been publicly released, I believe. So this is just anecdotal, right? This is from my experience being in broadcasting, observing what's going on, and some conversations I've had, that I believe the biggest reason that they didn't stream a couple of those events was money. There was some issues with where the floors were and setting up more equipment there, broadcast equipment. That's money. That means money. They didn't want to spend that money on that. And I believe one of the big goals this year, like with most businesses, is to at least break even on the games. And they haven't done that very often. People don't realize, but the years that like the Open was the biggest, 2018, 2017, those times, they weren't making money on the CrossFit Games. They were losing money. The games was like a money pit. They had to spend money to put the games on. And I believe this year, they're focused on at least making them break even. I guess the real hope would one day be profitable, but at this point, break even, which is not what they were doing when people felt like CrossFit was at its best. And losing money is not actually, in my opinion, at your best, or likely to be a sustainable business model. So there's been some changes. Not streaming those events, not paying those people to stream those events, saved tens of thousands of dollars. And it's too bad that we couldn't all see them correctly. We couldn't all see them like in a broadcast format, but they did make an effort to show them to us, which was awesome. And you can see Chase Ingram broadcasted some of those on the CrossFit podcast YouTube, and he did get some not as nice comments about the broadcast, and I think that's just based on comparison, right? Because you looked at the CrossFit podcast broadcast of those events were done on cell phones versus the real broadcast done on broadcast cameras. Yeah, it wasn't the same. But I was impressed they did anything, because they didn't have to show us any of it. They could have just shown us that highlight reel they were going to show us like they initially promised. But they got something out, and despite Chase's frustrations over some of the comments.
If you like more camera angles, get your over here in Berlin and give them to us. Other than that, enjoy the show.
I personally think they did a pretty decent job with what they were given, and probably saved a ton of money, allowing there to be a possibility of this game season being closer to profitable, or at least being less in the negatives than some previous years. And that's a sign of hopefully continued growth and longevity of the sport. And ultimately, because this is so new, there still are some growing pains. Figuring out exactly how to even create the sport seems to be something we're still learning. We have this new ranking system. We're still figuring out how many semifinals we need. It used to be regionals. It used to be sanctionals. There have just been so many changes. But this is a new sport, and people are comparing it to older sports at times. Like I mentioned Nate Edwardson at the beginning of this video. He decided to move on and do golf videos, which is awesome. I'm glad he found what he is more passionate about right now. But golf has been around for like hundreds of years. And there are a lot more fans of it. So yeah, you're gonna get more views on it because there are more fans. So that shouldn't be shocking. People have been golfing their whole lives. Not many adults have been CrossFitting their whole lives. CrossFit originated in 2000. So it's comparing, you know, apples to Apple computers. Like, they're not the same thing. And I just feel like CrossFit isn't dying. And they're also still trying to figure out programming of these events. I've heard some arguments about unknown and unknowable. It's interesting for us that know the sport and understand the concept. For casual observers, it's a little bit harder to understand some of the events we have. And there is some argument to maybe repeat more events more often, so it's more easily measurable. We all repeat workouts, benchmarks in the gym. We see them less in competition, and maybe there's an argument for doing those more often. And I've heard some people make that. But while I think CrossFit isn't dying, something else, maybe? Noble, we haven't really talked about in a while. Noble laid off 35% of its staff and then didn't really show up at semifinals. I understand they had representatives there, but I believe at least the Northeast semifinal, there was a sectioned off place in Vendor Village for Noble to sell gear, and they didn't show up. I went to North America West, which was the next weekend, and there was not an area that was just like blank for Noble, because I think at that point, everyone knew they weren't coming and we didn't need to put space out for them. But there's a lot of questions about what's going on with Noble, about the layoffs, and about potentially there being another title sponsor of the CrossFit Games in the future. And that I would be a lot less surprised to see than CrossFit die altogether. It is probably more likely than not that CrossFit will exist 2 years from now, but there's a chance the title sponsor isn't going to be Noble. And we have had different title sponsors. We had Reebok just before Noble. So that future of CrossFit, who is going to be the title sponsor of CrossFit in the next 2 years, that I think could change. Who knows? Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Oh, also, if you saw Carson popping up throughout the video, he seemed to want attention. Okay, bye.